Ken Weeb from Sportsnet. Go ahead, Weber.
Thanks, Gregor. Morning, Paul. I know you shared your view on the hit yesterday. What can you tell us about your opinion of the suspension that was levied?
I think yesterday I was probably resigned to the fact, whether I liked it or not, that he was going to get 2 games. I think I'd mentally got myself to that. I think 4 is excessive. The Department of Players Safety has every right, and they're needed in their role to set precedent for hits, especially when there's an injury involved. So they have that right. I don't agree with it, but it's set now, and that's where the National Hockey League game goes going forward. And we'll learn from it and move on.
We'll go next to Sarah Orlesky from TSN. Go ahead, Sarah.
Paul, we saw Stastny out there for morning skate. Is he going to be available for you this evening?
Yeah, I'll make that decision. We want to see how he comes back to the game tonight. I'll make that decision at game time.
We'll go next to Ted Wyman from the Winnipeg Sun. Go ahead, Ted.
Mark was emotional, raw, honest, very upfront in speaking with us just before you. How do you think he's doing as a man after what he's gone through the last couple of days?
Good. You know what? He loves this game so much. His first concern genuinely was for Jake Evans. Nobody likes to see that. Mark's got an entire career at the opposite end of that spectrum. I think they had him for 3 hits in the Edmonton series, and it was a hard fought series. And I don't know how many penalty minutes he had this year, but it wouldn't be 20. So that's the opposite of who he is as a player. But I also think he's an aware guy. He's not a guy that runs around the ice and bad things happen. He's aware. So it's unfortunate. We're going to lose arguably our best forward for 4 critical playoff games. So we're paying a huge price. He's paying a huge price. So that part hurts. And I understand. I mean, I don't know what he said. I wasn't listening, but I can tell you that was probably from the heart. It's just how, in terms of dealing with him. So knowing Mark, he'll be on the ice every day, getting better, trying to get better and get ready for his next playoff game.
We'll go next to Scott Billick from the Sun. Go ahead, Scott.
Thanks, Gregor. Hey, Paul. Your first 15 or so years in this league wouldn't have had to deal with social media and stuff like that. Some of the backlash that Mark has received on there. He owned or accepts that. I mean, that's part of the gig, and he realizes criticism there. But he did talk about the criticism that his family has received, his parents, phone calls even. And there's even been some suggestion of substance abuse and stuff like that on social media.
His parents?
No. Mark is on that one. Substance abuse. The Mark was on something.
Okay, so let's just do this. Right? We'll just try to keep this. I'll answer the question. But let's just try to keep this as professional as we possibly can. I'm going to assume when you're talking about social media, somebody has a Twitter account. That does not make them professional. So you're professional journalists. This is what I do for a living. Let's just rule out the stupidity. I'm sorry that it's wrong that Mark's a grown man. He can handle it. You stand in front of the camera here and answer your questions professionally, emotionally. It's wonderful. I mean, there's no place for any of this to be directed any outside. And I would suggest that maybe we would all keep our perspective. My understanding is Jake Evans is going to be okay. That's primary number one. That's the most important thing. But attacking a man's family because you're cheering for the other team is silliness. But let's not introduce those people or the fact that you understand that all the players are tested all the time, that Mark Scheifele is about the cleanest living man I've ever met in my life. So let's just not even introduce those fools.
We'll go next to Kelly Moore from 680 CGOB. Go ahead, Kelly.
Hey, Paul, if you can maybe talk a little bit about the experience that you had to go through in the bubble last summer and how that might prepare you for these next 4 games, as well as the depth that, we've talked a lot about this year.
Yeah.
Prepared for these circumstances.
We're going to put whether Paul Stastny's in the lineup or not, we're going to put 4 really good centermen on the ice, and they're key pieces to our lineup, right? Those are the interface between your defensive and your offensive game, those center icemen. So we've been fortunate in that we've added depth down the middle, and it's certainly going to get tested when you have 1 or 2 really important guys out of your lineup. and then a more mature group, right? We're a little older here. We're a little more grizzled. We've seen more things. So I'm expecting a really good A game. You know, I mean, you're always worried about that first game after a long layoff. We weren't great in a lot of areas. So I expect we're going to play a whole heck of a lot better here tonight.
Next, Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks, Gregor. Hey, Paul. You know, I've always appreciated your perspective and insight when it comes to, particularly when it comes to historical moments in the NHL, and particularly when it comes to the shift in the game. You know, we talked about, you know, hitting from behind before. It wasn't too many weeks ago that you kind of talked about that never really happened because of it. You mentioned the word precedent, and I'm curious on that note here. When we look at suspensions in the NHL, they never really had a guy like Mark Scheifele who's had a squeaky clean reputation leading into a play that then injured a player. Are we witnessing a shift here, a precedent shift here in where the game is headed and what's going to be allowed in the future?
Well, I'm going to assume so, right? Because if you got a player that has like not a lack of suspensions, I mean, basically none. He's this clean offensive player, and you know what? In my opinion, you know, you do have to possibly treat the repeat offenders, you know, more severely. But I think should be a minimum standard for all players. It doesn't matter whether you're an offensive guy. I mean, you're just a man, and you have to be held accountable for your actions. But you know, I looked at that hit and I used the word clean. And the reason why I used it is because the things that I don't like in a hit that I call them dirty weren't there for me. I don't agree with the distance traveled argument because there's no other option in that distance traveled. A forechecking route, you can decide whether you're sweeping, whether you take an angle on a puck. You get to make those decisions. In a straight line meeting at a point of contact, I don't think distance traveled is part of the argument, but that's fine. But his feet are on the ice, his arms are tucked in. You never heard the words principal point of contact was the head, because it wasn't, and it was from the front. So in my history in the game, that would be a clean hit, right? He didn't get an elbow up. It wasn't. Now, was it hard? God, it was hard. And because of the distance traveled, because of the way that play developed, you got a really massive hit for sure. So that's fine. That's the rule now going forward. Everybody gets it. It's a good thing. If it keeps one more guy from getting hurt, we are 100% behind it. And they have the right, the players' safety to do that. I'm not complaining about that. I just thought, from what I know, I thought we were going to get a 2-gamer, and we ended up getting more. We'll live with it. We'll move on. And that's the standard going forward.
We'll go next to Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet. Go ahead, Sean.
Hey, Paul, what can you tell us about Dylan DeMelo's availability and a replacement for him if that's needed?
Yeah, so Dylan won't play tonight. I mean, I think he's beyond day-to-day. Like, I think we're going to be talking about a week anyway. But it's a soft tissue injury, so those are harder to define when he's going to be available. I don't know the answer to that. The lineup decisions we'll keep to ourselves.
We'll go next to Richard Labbe from La Presse. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, hi, Paul. You've been around the game long enough. Usually when things like that happen, we hear about the code and players looking for some sort of retribution. Are you expecting in the next 2 games here any sort of like circus-like atmosphere, anything like that?
No, I'm not. I mean, I would think they will look at that as suspension. I shouldn't speak for them. I don't know how they look at that suspension, but a price has been paid. I don't, there's too much on the line here for both teams to run around. And we're 20 years past having either team have a bunch of guys that really can, right? Like there's nobody in either lineup that's there for that role solely. I mean, will it be physical? Sure. But nobody's taking penalties to exact revenge. I think, excuse me. I think you're probably going to see a really, really cleanly played game that's played real fast.
Thanks very much, Coach.
Okay, guys.
Thanks.